À partir de...
Okay, I just click on continue. I receive a message. Je ne vois pas encore de personnes connectées. Félicie, vous voudrez bien nous dire si nous avons des participants qui sont connectés?
On a des participants, ça vient. Tu peux juste regarder en bas aussi chez toi.
OK.
Quand tu as désactivé le son, tu as vidéo, tu as participant.
Absolument, je vois, merci. Merci.
Voilà. Tu peux juste cliquer et tu verras les participants. Tu as la partie panéliste, tu as la partie spectateur.
OK. Good. Shall we start, Leandro?
Yes, sir. Fine by me.
Let us give maybe, we call that the quart d'heure technique in French.
Hervé, on leur accorde 4 autres petites minutes, le temps que tout le monde puisse se connecter.
OK, Félicie. Good afternoon, colleague. We are online. We would like to give to other fellow colleagues that are trying to connect 5 minutes. So we will start at 5 minutes past 12. Thank you.
Hervé?
Okay. Can you see me? Good afternoon, colleague. My name is Hervé Nefopekam. I'm going to be moderating this session, this brown bag session dedicated to the CACF, the Canada African Development Bank Climate Fund. We have as panelist Leandro Azevedo, who is currently coordinating that fund. Before starting, let me give a brief introduction. Actually, we spent a couple of years, I would say 3 years almost, negotiating with Canada on this fund. A similar program have been implemented through other MDBs, and FIRM and PECG together work to ensure that the African Development Bank also have a fund similar to the other MDBs. So this was signed in March 2020, and it was a long way. Let me just give, before introducing Leandro, let me just give some basic housekeeping rules. The presentation, Leandro will speak for about 20 minutes. And after that, we'll open up for question and answer. Obviously, I think we are now all familiar with raising hand or eventually sending through the Q&A functionality of Zoom. So that's the way through which we will take question, the question and answer functionality. And Leandro and myself will respond to your question. And obviously, if there are any other things that require follow-up, we are there to help and to support. So let me introduce Leandro. Leandro currently sits at PECG. Is in the Power, Energy, Green Growth, and Climate Change Complex. He is a principal climate change officer. And before leading on the CACF, Leandro has been coordinating what we call the Climate Investment Fund, a very successful instrument hosted outside the bank, but which the bank is an implementing agent. And through that fund, the bank invested close to $1 billion USD in Africa, both in mitigation and adaptation projects. And some of the flagship projects include the new plant in Morocco. Many of us know about that plant. And we also have the Menengai geothermal project in Kenya. But it's important to mention that prior joining the energy complex, Leandro worked for the private sector. I think that's where some of his very good skills come from. And he was in charge, for example, of putting together the Cabo Electrica wind farm project in Cabo Verde. And of course, today he is now going to lead on the implementation under the oversight, obviously, of Garrett Philip, the manager of the division of the CACF. Without further delay, I will ask Leandro to take the floor. And colleague, please, if you have any question, kindly use the Q&A functionality of Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Hervé, for the introduction. Let me start first by saying hello to many of the participants. It's been a while, I haven't seen many of you. Let me also send a word of appreciation to some of the colleagues that are also present here today that were essential in the discussions and in the structuring of the fund. I've seen Talumba, I've seen Ibrahim. They were really essential, obviously also FIRM and you, in taking this fund to approval and up to date. I'm here today then to talk about the Canada African Development Bank Climate Fund. This is a 132.9 million special fund which objective is to extend large-scale long-term concessional loans to climate mitigation and adaptation projects that embed gender equality principles throughout the various phases of the project cycle, particularly the empowerment of women and girls. Here you can see the key timeline from endorsement by the Standing Committee on Partnerships, which was obtained in July 2020 until today. It is worth noting that the team went through the bank's internal process, the negotiations with the donor, up to the approval by the Board of Governors relatively quick. It was in March 2021 that the CACF arrangement was signed between the President and the Government of Canada. And the full transfer of the commitment arrived soon after. An important point is that the fund is not yet operational. We are currently seeking internal approval from Canada and our senior management on the operational guidelines. The document is already finalized. The donor confirmed that they do not have any major issues. But this is a step we need still to undertake prior to start considering programming of funds to projects. Very quickly, this is the two windows of CACF. We have the investment facility at $122.9 million. So this is really the main facility of CACF. And then we have a technical assistance facility of $10 million that will mainly support investment facility operations throughout the various phases of the project. We have project preparation, of course. It's an essential aspect, obviously. As we go through implementation and we close projects, there will be an element of learning that we will also try to address. I will focus mainly on the investment facility because it's really what matters for the bank and for the colleagues. We'll be providing concessional loans, sovereign operations at terms already fixed, and senior concessional loans for non-sovereign operations. So there won't be any element of subordination on CACF loans that will be deployed. Let me continue now to slide number 5. CACF is the first special fund of the bank focusing only on climate change to benefit from a known grant contribution from the donor. You can see in blue the flows of the resources. We have the repayable contribution from Canada, which the bank will invest into eligible projects during the investment period of CACF, which will last for 5 years. So meaning that from March 2021, the bank has 5 years to deploy the full amount of the investment facility. And eventually, as projects start repaying those loans, both interest and principal, those resources, those flows of cash, obviously, will reflow back to the donor. They will not be providing an approval or a formal approval on a project-by-project basis. However, they want to ensure they are able to clear, review the environmental and social impact studies of category 1 and 2 projects. And they also want to verify if the beneficiaries or the borrowers of funds in CACF, both for the TAF and the investment facility, are in their sanctions list or not. In case they are, we won't be able to pursue such transactions. Essentially, you will see that project default risk is on the side of Canada. I think this is really a key enabler of this fund. as you may know, the bank cannot take credit risk on funds that are not its own funds, its own statutory funds. And so obviously Canada had to agree to this. Obviously this means the bank has a great fiduciary responsibility towards the donor in ensuring that deploys CACF resources with the same degree of care as we would deploy our own. There's also in green the reporting flows, and those, as you will see further down in the presentation, are substantial. But also important is the annual consultations. At the beginning, the expectation was to put in place an oversight committee. At the donor's request, we replaced that with the annual consultation where both parties, the African Development Bank and the donor, will sit down and discuss matters of common importance in relation to the implementation of the fund. In terms of the governance structure, we'll have the figure of the technical review committee, which will review and ensure quality at entry and endorse all proposals under the technical assistance facility. For the investment facility, projects will be approved in line with the same process that is already in place to approve banks' own loans to our projects. And as you see, the role of the board of directors, which includes the approval of loans under the investment facility, but also any grant above $1 million, and also amendments to the CACF arrangement, which really guide the implementation of the fund. The annual consultations, I already briefly mentioned them. Worth mentioning as well is the role of the CACF coordination unit, which will be housed in PCG1, the division where I work, that is managed by Garrett, that is also present in this presentation. Basically, the coordination unit will be the delivery and administrative secretariat of CACF. We lead donor engagement with Canada, eventually down the road with others. We play a key role in organizing the TRC meetings and the annual consultations. But we will also participate the project appraisal teams of projects under consideration to ensure there is an alignment with CACF requirement and the obligations of the bank expressed in the arrangement, as well as in cooperation with the bank's blended finance coordinator, and Ibrahim is in the call, and it would be nice also to hear from him about this, to really review each individual NSO that is being proposed, and really take a look at the proposed concessionality of the CACF loan in line with the DFI blended finance principles, which we will mention a little bit further down in this presentation. Obviously, when applicable, we will also implement TEF grants if and when those are to be implemented by the bank and not necessarily by the beneficiaries. An area of focus will be gender equality, in line with Canada's feminist international assistance policy. Gender is really an important factor for them in the development aid they provide, both directly and indirectly through the MDBs. On the left and right side, you see already some of the sectors, let's say, that can benefit from support. We'll go also into more detail on those, but the fact I want really to emphasize is that really gender will be at the center of CACF implementation. Here you can have some more details about that, and As you may know, the bank's gender mark system at the moment is not yet implemented in the context of NSOs, only sovereign operations. There's been a commitment from the bank in the context of the general capital increase and the latest ADF replenishment to roll that out to NSOs, but that has not happened yet. Canada wanted us to really do that already in the context of CACF. It was something that we couldn't really agree to. But there are a number of activities that could be considered during appraisal and also during project supervision. Gender mainstreaming exercises, including audits at the borrower levels, with clear recommendations will probably be required. Gender-friendly log frames, which is something we are increasingly doing in the context of our operations already. But also engage with the borrowers and try to understand what kind of corporate policies they have already in place when it comes to gender, and also to provide some advisory. I can already tell you that we are preparing a grant proposal under the TAF to be implemented by the bank to hire a consulting firm to really support the various departments and also the coordination unit in making sure that we are looking at gender appropriately and to meet the expectations of the donor. One other important aspect to consider, and I think this will be much easier to do in the context of NSOs, will be to insert in the loan agreements certain undertakings by the borrowers to deliver certain gender activities or to commit to certain things that contribute to gender equality. We are already doing so when we force them to provide certain reporting on certain aspects of our projects. It's basically going a bit beyond what we are already doing and making really sure that we are delivering in that front. I won't go into much detail here, nor in this slide, and neither also in the next three. This basically goes into a bit of more detail on what kind of projects will be eligible when it comes to sector and technologies, renewable energy, energy efficiency. There's also transmission and distribution systems, etc. The list goes on, and I guess you colleagues can share the presentation with colleagues after, so that they really understand what those are, both for mitigation and adaptation, and those are also included in the arrangement. Importantly to mention is that if there's any activity or a project that falls outside any of those sectors or technologies for which we can build a climate rationale, we can still seek CACF support. It's just a matter of consulting the donor and obtaining their approval. So it's important to bear that in mind. Let me now move into the next slide and some of the expected targets at the fund level. So Canada expects that at least 60% of the investment facility funds are deployed in the context of non-sovereign operations. Can be more. They are also expecting that for every single dollar of CACF resources deployed, at least $4 from private sector are leveraged at the project level. They are also expecting AfDB to co-finance CACF projects on at least a one-to-one basis. Can be more, but at least we need to match. They are expecting us to at least find one adaptation project under the investment facility with an aspirational goal of additional projects. 80% of resources to be deployed in low-income countries, no more than 10%, obviously net of fees, to be deployed in sustainable forestry projects. And then all CACF loans must be in line with level 2 Rio policy markers for climate categories. As you know, the MDBs have their own joint methodology to determine what a climate mitigation or a climate adaptation project is. The level 2 Rio policy markers is just a different methodology that donors tend to look more into detail as opposed to the methodology from MDBs. What we'll have to do is, as we are establishing eligibility, we just need to undertake this additional assessment to make sure they fall within those policy markers. Let me now go and discuss a little bit the concentration and co-investment limits. This is important. We have a single obliger limit of 20%, country limit of 20%, a regional limit of 50%. When it comes to sovereign guaranteed loans, again, it's up to 40%. I mentioned in the previous slide that 60% or more should go into non-sovereign. There's a small mistake on sovereign guaranteed, non-sovereign guaranteed loans. You should read non-sovereign operations loans. So I need to delete the word guaranteed. But going back to the sovereign guaranteed loans, the co-investment limit from CACF is no more than our own exposure to the project. They will be looking for projects in countries with a sovereign credit rating of B or higher, as provided by S&P or equivalent from Fitch or Moody's in case an S&P rating doesn't exist. There's a 20% limit for any HIBC country. In addition, that country should have a score of low or moderate sovereign debt risk distress, as provided by the joint World Bank and IMF methodology. The co-investment limit on non-sovereign operations for CACF loans is that the bank and CACF do not provide more than 50% of the total costs of a project. As you know, the bank cannot provide 1/3 of a project total cost with its own statutory funds. What we are saying here is that if CACF is participating in a specific operation, that limit can be no more than 50%. In terms of the credit rating distribution for non-sovereign operations, we have up to 40% B minus and 60% equal or above B. In terms of the financial instruments and the terms, so as I said earlier, CACF will only provide loans. For NSOs, we'll be able to go to a maximum tenor of 16 years with a grace period of 5 years. The floor interest rate is set at 1.5%, so that's the maximum concessionality we can provide. There won't be any fees charged or attached to the CACF loans. The 50% co-financing requirement, I already mentioned it in the previous slide. The seniority, so senior, CACF loan will have to be senior as well. So it will probably rank pari passu with, it will have to rank pari passu with the loan of the bank. And we'll also be able to accept sculpted repayment profiles for the repayment of CACF loans if they are also applicable to the bank's loan. The interest rate is just a floor rate. So, and we'll discuss this a bit further during this presentation. Doesn't mean that all NSOs will benefit from that pricing. It means that the bank cannot provide any rate that is lower than 1.5%, but will do an analysis on a case-by-case basis to really establish that interest rate. But the terms for SOs are pretty much aligned with what we are already doing from our own account, with the interest rate really at 0.7%, which is highly competitive, and we hope will help or contribute to help countries driving public sector investments into climate change. I wanted to briefly discuss again the floor interest rate for NSOs. And so whereas the terms, as I said, for sovereign operations are fixed and known at all times, for NSOs, this will have to be set on a case-by-case basis. And you see the reference there to the DFINS principles for blended concessional finance for private sector projects. As we'll be working on or considering any NSO, the CACF coordination unit in cooperation with the bank's blended finance coordinator will undertake an analysis on the alignment of the operation with those principles that will be incorporated as an annex to the project appraisal report that will be submitted to the board for approval, and which will provide a clear financial terms for the CACF loan, including an interest rate that can be equal to the floor rate or can be a bit higher, depending on what are the needs of the project. Just for you to see here, we have the blended finance principles, crowding in and minimum concessionality. So concessional finance is scarce, and we should provide the minimum concessionality possible to ensure that we are not replacing any investors from a specific operation. Commercial sustainability is also important, the economic rationale, and so on and so forth. And so the analysis is really centered around these 5 items, those 5 principles, and with that, the pricing proposal being made to our board of directors for approval. Very briefly on the technical assistance facility, these are the 4 components: project preparation, coordination and facilitation, gender and human rights advancement, and supervision, research and learning. The first 3 are really applicable more at the appraisal stage of IF operations. The objective with the TAF is really to support operations being considered at the level of the investment facility. And the last component, again, is more geared towards learning, which will come at a much later stage. The budget is there for information. The 500,000 Canadian dollars missing represent the fees the bank is charging on the TAF. This is a summary of our reporting obligations, just for colleagues to have an idea. This will include semi-annual narrative reports, reporting on reflows of the repayable contribution, not only actual, but also estimations moving forward, project level results and portfolio level results. So we have our own M&D framework, which indicators will be included or should be included in the log frames of the bank so that they can be monitored during implementation. There's also a financial model. And then, everything that is related to quarterly and annual audits, the E&S studies, information on the borrowers and beneficiaries, on who they are, where they are established, etc. And obviously all aspects related to financial management, disbursements, repayments, etc. This, and that's really my last slide, the bank will charge around 8 million Canadian dollars in fees to administrate CACF during the life of the fund. This is a brief pro forma budget we put together. We feel that, and assuming that the CACF coordinator being a staff won't really be, salary will already be covered. We feel that $600,000 per year is an amount required to really help the implementation of the fund. Again, it's important to mention that during the review by the Senior Management Committee, it was mentioned by various vice presidents that it was really important that we are able to source resources to staff appropriately the coordination unit. To date, there's no resources whatsoever being allocated to this coordination unit. So I think that's also an important point for discussion as we are here together. Thank you, Hervé, and thank you, colleagues, for your time.
Thank you so much, Leandro, and thank you, colleague, for your attention. I sent a message a few seconds before Leandro concluded his presentation, requesting colleagues to submit their question. Maybe I will start. I see that in the question box there are already 2 questions. I encourage colleagues to please submit your question. Don't be shy. Myself, I have a question for you, Leandro. I have a question for Leandro, and my question is quite simple. To my knowledge, we have this is the reimbursable contribution, Leandro, if I'm correct. Yeah. And this is the second reimbursable contribution that the bank is hosting. The first being AGTF, if my memory is right. I was wondering if you could share with us how important for us as an institution is to have this type of instrument, the reimbursable contribution. So far, we have been raising grants, but now, and there are many to come in the pipes, we have reimbursable contribution. How important is for you, for the bank, for the beneficiaries, to have this type of instrument? And can you tell us a little bit more how it works vis-a-vis the donor? Because we know the grant is gone. They give the money and they forget about it. How does it work for the reimbursable contributions?
So, Hervé, thank you. I think, generally speaking, we are, going through a situation where donors are obviously getting pressure to provide more and more support to developing countries. We see the climate urgency recently and also over the last years, something that will really continue. But you also see a dynamic whereby donors are increasingly more interested in providing contributions other than grants. That doesn't mean that they aren't still providing grants, and our ADF replenishment was a success. But I think CACF, and as you said, the AGTF is more or less the same structure, even though the scope is a bit more broad. I think that the CACF and AGTF really position the bank, or help positioning the bank better as we continue our engagement with donors in attracting other types of contributions. Knowing, of course, that resources are very limited and will continue to be limited vis-a-vis the needs. So I find it valuable to also mobilize this type of resources. Obviously, it's crucial that we ensure that concessionality is there, that financing can be deployed at terms below those provided by the market. And that's the case with CACF. And so that concessionality can really help us drive investments into sectors that are not so proven, which is the case of many climate change related sectors, especially adaptation. But really, it's really important to still be able to provide that concessionality. Otherwise, investors will continue doing business as usual, and that's something that we really want to change with CCF and other similar funds.
Thank you very much, Leandro. I can see that in the chat, there are a lot of questions coming in. Let me read them for you. A little bit linked to what you just said, Leandro, a question from Walter. A question from Walter. Walter is asking, what makes this fund unique and different from DCF and Jeff, or even AdRifi?
This fund is a special fund, right? Managed directly by the bank. GCF and Jeff are external climate finance facilities. They've been established outside the bank. The bank only acts as an implementing entity. I think being a special fund established in line with the bank's chart really puts the bank in a much better position to drive the fund strategically, of course, and to really decide or push or pressure donors, let's say, in how the fund will evolve over the time, and the type of projects we'll support. So obviously the bank should continue to access funds from the GCF and JEF, but one thing doesn't preclude the other, because there's clearly a lack of development resources, concessional resources vis-a-vis the needs out there. So the more resources we can get, the best, because the need will be there.
Yes, indeed. And let me chip in some word here, Leandro, as I'm putting my hat of firm, a resource mobilization officer. Following the successful conclusion of the negotiation on the CACF, Canada came to us with more money, basically, and still reimbursable contribution, but in another sector. So we can see that donors, yes, they have less and less grant money, but they have this type of monies available to support our mandate. Let me just quickly respond to a question from Regina. Yes, we will share the PowerPoint to all of the participants. Let me inform you that we will share the PowerPoint, we'll have them. Another question for you, Leandro, from Regina again. In view of limited resources, how will potential projects be prioritized?
That's a very good question. Thank you, Regina. I will respond with a term that I don't really like much, which is readiness. But I think that there will be mainly two aspects driving CCF. One is the understanding that the fund has an investment period of 5 years, which start counting already in March 2021. So the longer it takes for the donor and the bank to obtain a clearance or approval on the operational guidelines, the more time of the investment period is being eaten up by, until we are able to obtain such approval. So we need to make sure that before the investment period ends, we are able to really deploy the resources. When I mention readiness, what I'm trying to refer is CACF needs to support projects that really have a high probability of reaching board approval. Many times what happens is that you are looking at projects being included in the pipelines, and those projects won't get out of there over a period of 2 or 3 years. And so, you cannot be in a situation where the bank ends up signing, let's say, a mandate letter with a potential borrower, and ends up in a situation where the project is not moving anywhere and the resources are somehow logged, even though mandate letters are signed on a best effort basis. And we cannot afford a situation like that. So we really need to do a good work in finding projects that are ready to move swiftly through appraisal and to board approval. And we definitely need to be careful with the type of commitments we make to our borrowers on the type of funds we can mobilize. Also because these are not banks' normal resources, statutory resources. These are concessional resources from a donor. So the fiduciary responsibility of the bank is also important. But really, to finalize my response to this question, I think it's really about readiness. And that can be, a project that has already gone through concept stage clearance and is ready to move into appraisal. It could be a project that is nearing board approval, and we've identified a number of projects over the past that were in this situation for which we consider resources from the CIF, for example, or the JEF as well. What I usually see is that, because climate change really cuts across various sectors, keeping ourselves on top of the entire climate change pipeline across the bank can be also challenging. But obviously the coordination unit will be more than happy, and it's also one of our responsibilities to really explore those operations and really establish that readiness in cooperation with the investment teams of the bank.
Thank you, Leandro. Two more questions that I would throw to you from our participants. Question from Walter. Considering that the fund is only available to low-income countries, have we checked that this country will meet most of the conditions, e.g., those relating to HIPC, sovereign and other risk rating, etc.?
So, yes, so 80% must be deployed in the context of low-income countries. This discussion was probably the most complex and most difficult with Canada during the negotiations. And it's obviously related to the fact that we are talking about the repayable contribution. The more we've asked them to lower the floor interest rate, the more conservative they were in terms of the credit ratings demanded for the project's eligibility. And so in the end, it was a compromise between both parties. Obviously, we did that assessment during the negotiations phase with the donor because it was really crucial. We couldn't end up with a facility for which we wouldn't have any country eligible. So we have a substantial number of countries that will be eligible. We were able to negotiate with them the inclusion or the acceptance of equivalent credit ratings from other agencies, from agencies other than S&P. This was something not included in the arrangement, and that also contributes to further increase the list of eligible countries. Obviously, this is something we will have to monitor on an annual basis or on an ongoing basis as we start implementation of the fund. But yes, we feel strongly about our ability to find a pipeline to use these funds as we go through the investment period.
Okay, thank you, Leandro. I have two other questions for you. The first one from Cecile. Thank you, Cecile, for being there. In the presentation, the slide on NSO conditions says that the country should be at least B-. Is this the country or the project? Because typically in project finance transaction, you need to factor in a couple of notches for project risk, such as country risk will be best possible. In context of COVID impact, many leaks have been downgraded. Do you envisage this leading to a possible renegotiation of risk parameter with Canada, as the pool of country you may do business with may be increasingly limited? How do you answer that question, Leandro? Which is something even the ADF, the African Development Fund, is facing.
Can you, Hervé, apologies, could you please read it again?
The question of Cecile is the following. In the presentation of the NSO condition, we said that the country should be at least B-. Is this the country or the project? That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question, in context of COVID impact, many leaks have been downgraded. Do you envisage this leading to a possible renegotiation of risk parameter with Canada?
So when it comes to the credit ratings, to determine eligibility, so for NSOs, non-sovereign operations, will be using sovereign credit ratings, national sovereign credit rating. Well, they are sovereign, so they are national, provided by S&P. If there is an S&P or a rating issued by S&P, then a similar rating by Fitch and or Moody's. When it comes to sovereign operations, we'll be using the annual ratings, annual credit ratings issued by the bank. So our risk management team on an annual basis undertakes an assessment that in accordance with our own rules and procedures, provides a credit rating to every country we do business with. So for sovereign operations, we'll follow those ratings. And if they fall within the credit distribution limits, then the project will be eligible. If not, then no. There will be timings to establish those ratings, because we cannot afford to start working on a project for over 5 or 6 or 8 months. And let's say one day before the board approves a project, S&P would downgrade the country to the point of that country not being eligible anymore. So for NSOs, we agreed that the best time to lock down that rating was the date in which a bank eventually signs a mandate letter with the borrower. In the case of sovereign operations, is really the date, the annual date at which the bank issues those ratings. And so that timing is also very important. On the, you are muted, Hervé, sorry.
Sorry. We have a question from Philip. Philip, sorry, you have thrown your question since some time already. Philip would like to know if the technical assistance facility will be used for the preparation of projects that will not be funded by the CACF. Andrew.
So this is hard to say, right? I mean, obviously, we want to support the projects that will benefit from the investment facility, but there's no guarantee during the appraisal stage that that will be the case, right? So, the priority is really to try as much as possible to target projects that stand a good probability of, eventually benefiting from a CACF loan. But obviously, there could be situations where those projects might fall out, from our pipelines and not be really approved. and that's why, again, readiness, it's an important aspect. So it's also important to highlight that, you know, the riskiest part of any project is really during the development stage. And so while it is okay for a facility like CACF, through the technical assistance facility, to take on board some of that risk, it's also our responsibility to ensure that the sponsors have put resources as well into the development of the projects, and are also bearing some of those risks that can be huge at that stage. But yes, it can happen that eventually an operation will be supported through the TAF that will not receive or benefit from a CACF loan. Obviously, that's not the objective.
Thank you very much, Leandro. A question from Marco. I think this will be yes, we will still take one more question after this one. Do you support a fuel switching project, CNG conversion in particular?
We are talking about the, I think I've read this question already. Can you please repeat it? Sorry.
Yes. Do you support fuel switching project, CNG conversion in particular?
If I support?
Yes. If the fund, if the CACF will support fuel switching projects?
No. Even if we end up with a more efficient solution, it's very unlikely Canada will support that.
And finally, maybe the last question. Regina had raised the question. Let me read it for you. Are there limits to how much a project can access? Also, do you fund programs, framework program, which will eventually identify sub-projects?
So the answer on the programs is no. CACF will not support programs. Will support specific projects. So as you go to approval at the board, you need to have already finalized the environmental and social feasibility at the project level. And so we wouldn't be in conditions to provide or to obtain approval for a CACF loan for a program that does not really go in detail on what those impacts might be at the project level. Also, we wouldn't be really in conditions to undertake a detailed enough assessment on the blended finance principles to really determine the minimum concessionality, for example. I would say that for this kind for programs, facilities like the GCF and the CIF are much better placed than a fund like CACF to provide that kind of support. The other part of the question, sorry, Hervé, I missed it. You are muted.
Yes. No, that was a question. That was the question, Leandro. I think we have gone through all the questions, and we are 2 minutes to the time we had agreed upon. I wanted to thank all the participants and for making the time to come to listen to what we had to share with you, to listen to what Leandro and his team will be opening soon for application, because as he said, the operational guidelines will be approved soon. And I hope that we will have a lot of projects to fund, because as the focal point of Canada in the bank, I think if we are successful in implementing this facility, it will serve as a leverage to receive more funding of this nature, reimbursable contribution from Canada. Leandro, do you want to add a few words, please, before we close?
Yes, Hervé. I just want to maybe clarify or provide an answer to another question, if I may, about the budget that Cécile made. Let me just read. In the budget, it does not seem that provisions have been made for the middle and back office functions associated with managing the fund, example, FIFC, etc. Yet these functions will be key to meeting the fiduciary responsibilities of the bank. Are you planning an additional measure so that the concerned departments have the resources needed to deliver on mandate? It is another very good question. Let me start by saying that, from the 8 million Canadian dollars contribution fee the bank will receive, none of that money will go into our division budget, right? So it will go into some bank account, and the bank will manage that amount as they usually manage other administrative fees from other funds. The pro forma budget we put there is obviously specific to the CSF coordination unit, to the activities that we need to undertake, especially because the arrangement establishes that unit. Obviously, all departments in the bank have their own admin budget, and I think on the annual exercises that are done, it's important that the addition of new funds to the work program of these departments are also considered. But it's not really to us to really make recommendations on that allocation beyond our own request, which even that will be hard to get filled. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on that. Obviously, recognizing that the role other departments will play to secure the fiduciary responsibility of the bank will be massive. And extremely important.
Thank you, Leandro. Obviously, Cécile's question is a very important one, and I recognize that it's also a difficult one to respond to, because yes, the budget decisions are made at another level and take into consideration many other constraints. But obviously, what she's underlining is very important. We should be able to do whatever it takes to make sure that our fiduciary responsibility is well undertaken. Thank you very much. I want to thank all the participants. I want to thank you, Leandro, and all those who have asked questions, also those who have not asked questions. Please feel free to reach out to Leandro or to myself. Obviously, we will share the PowerPoint once the one or two typo Leandro has identified have been corrected. We'll share that with you. And we are there to support. If you have any question, you need any clarification, we'll be there. Thank you once again. Thank you, Leandro.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you.
And thank you, Félicie, for your support in the background. Even though we are not seeing you, you are not saying a word. Thanks a lot, Félicie.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Leandro. Good afternoon to all participants. Thank you.
Thank you, Félicie. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hervé. Thank you.
Thank you.